Good afternoon, Cranky Motorsports fans. Out here in the old garage today, I was doing some work for a neighbor of mine, spreading some crushed rock yesterday, and the whole time I had fluid dripping down one of my hydraulic lines from my quick disconnect from the high pressure side and leaking all over my boot and the steering assembly on my front end loader. So I went out to Tractor Supply, bought a new fitting for that, so I'm going to go ahead and change that, and then had to get some slime because one of the tires, or I should say one of the tubes on the Mighty Mongrel 3 leaks air. So when I fill it up after a couple of weeks, it's completely flat. I did tube them a while ago, so I'm thinking maybe there's a tiny pinhole in the tube. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a whole quart of slime in that tube. It's cheaper than buying another tube. This is about 10 bucks for a quart, and I think a tube is almost $20. Tubes are outrageously expensive. So I'm going to do that, and I also had to get a new tire gauge because the plastic on my old one had cracked and it was actually stopping the needle from. I'm going to go ahead and hook up on this thing and change that fitting out. So you guys want to come along and watch? That's great. Well, I just did a time lapse changing this fitting. Luckily, I've had everything on this tractor apart before, so that was a pretty easy swap. I don't particularly like how these hoses are set up. There's a 90-degree coming off of the controls with about a 4-inch long piece of pipe, and then the quick disconnect. That's not actually correct. Based on what my other loader has, these controls are actually supposed to be flipped around. So basically, if you twisted these all the way around so that all the lines were coming out the bottom, that's how my other loader is set up. And at some point in time, I may switch these around. But in order for me to do that, I actually need to replace all these hoses because these are 3/8 hoses, and they're not flexible enough to put going down and then back up to the loader. Or maybe they are. I mean, if I have this much of a bend in them now, there's a good chance that they'll work the other way, but I have to change a bunch of stuff around. I have to take this bracket off, and the other loader actually has a plate welded on at an angle going in the other direction. So this basically flips, like I said, upside down. So instead of being this way, basically flip it, not maybe 180 degrees, not quite 180 degrees, probably like maybe 100 degrees it has to swing around so that it's on an angle like this. I like it set up that way better on the other loader. However, I mean, this seems to work. I've seen loaders set up both ways, but this is just how this one's set up. So for now, it's going to stay this way. It does work pretty well. I just don't particularly like when the boom lifts up or the main lift arms lift up, these hoses get pushed so far back. It puts a lot of stress on these fittings. So this guy seems to be all right. I'll probably top off my system because it's a little bit low. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and pull some tractors out of the other side of the garage because I need to get to the Mongrel 3 so I can fill up that tire with some slime. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Starting to get a little bit of a puddle over here. I'm going to have to dig a channel out with a shovel. Shovel, not a shovel. I wish I had a shovel. And Bel Air, no shovel. Alrighty, so I gotta take Miss Emily out and at least the Red Roper loader to get to the Mongrel 3. Something else I forgot I have to do that I might do today, my 69 diesel, this guy, the fuel line from the tank to the motor has split and it was leaking pretty bad the last time I was running this guy. So I might tackle that today too. We'll see. Depends on what I have time for. It is nice. It's 50 degrees outside here. It's December 13th, 2020. And, you know, so it's a great day for getting stuff done as long as I have sun, because as some of you probably know, my garage doesn't have power unless I run a generator, which is kind of annoying. So let's get Miss Emily fired up here. This will be a cold start. It's probably been 2 weeks since I ran this. And like I said, it's 50 out, so it's not extremely cold, but cold enough. Gas is on. Fuel, not gas. here as far as getting all my machines running and driving, but as I said in my last video, I almost had all of my machines running and driving, but it's a moving target because I keep selling some and buying new ones, and there's still a couple that I have that need some things fixed on them, but for the most part, all my machines run and drive. For the most part, I have 1, 2, I don't know, 3, maybe 4 that don't run and drive well. 2 of them I haven't even tried starting since I put them together. And the other 2, one has a motor out, and I know I need a few things, so big deal. Out of 26 or 28, however many machines I have, only to have 4 of them that don't run, not that bad. And I just remembered I took the key out of this yesterday for something else. Now I need it. I'm gonna scratch all the paint on my red Roper's fenders up with my big muck boots. But muck boots are great. You just slip your feet in them. I've had these for a few years now. I got them as a gift when I started in sales at my company. And they're great. Let's see how the red Roper starts. Let's see if I can get, oh yeah, I got plenty of room now. Hopefully, I'll be able to easily fix the flat on this thing and be done with it once and for all. Ready for a sweet owning? It's nice and fuel it takes off. Let's go over to the Mongrel 3 here. Man, I love this machine. Must have had some fuel stuck in the exhaust because when I fired it up, it popped really loud. So what the issue is with this guy, this rear tire, for some reason, the last time when I put tubes in it, I might have reused tubes. I don't remember. I think I used... It might even have like a 6-12 tube in it, but that tire in the back leaks. After a couple of days it goes flat, and the sidewalls on these tires are so stiff that it's barely noticeable, but I do notice when it goes flat. So I'm going to pull the wheel weights off, pull the rim off. Actually, I wonder if I need to do that. I think the valve stem's on the inside, but oh yeah, I forgot I put wheel weights on the inside too. Well, I could, you know, if I roll this thing back, I might be able to put slime in without taking the tire off. Maybe. I don't know. It's not a great angle, but I guess I could give it a try. In order to use slime, if none of you have ever used slime, you have to take the valve stem out of the tube and put a clear tube or a clear hose on there, and you just squeeze the stuff in. Kind of like filling up a rear end. Except this has a tiny, like, less than 1/4 of an inch hole to squeeze that gooey stuff through. And it's kind of cold out. You know, 50 degrees, it ain't going to flow the best. But I think I'll give it a try rather than taking the wheel off. I'm going to try to do it. Maybe if I take this 3-point lift arm off, let it hang, I'll just drop it down. Yeah, that doesn't gain me anything. Maybe this does, but I don't know. I'll put it back on. Let me put a time lapse on here. So I was able to squeeze an entire bottle of slime into the valve stem on this thing, and while I was at it I put a new valve core in the tire, because sometimes just the valve cores go bad. The one that I just took out of the tube looked like I had already replaced it, but you never know. Sometimes even though something looks brand new, it might leak anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my hose down for my compressor, put some air in this guy, and then we'll see if it still leaks. Now, one thing that's important when you put slime in a tire like this is to make sure that you run it around for a while right after you put it in. The other thing is make sure that you clean out as best you can the valve stem so that the slime doesn't sit in the valve stem, because this is what the valve core looks like. It's this little tiny spring-loaded plunger thing. So when you put your air hose on here, it pushes this little needle down and the air goes through this valve and into the tire. Well, sometimes when you do that, there's a little tiny seal on the bottom, kind of like a rubber O-ring. And if that gets clogged up, sometimes the valve will actually get stuck open. And even though we just filled it with slime, sometimes it could leak all the air back out. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my hose and fill it. I just put an extension on my hose yesterday. Ow! Now I think I have 50 feet of hose instead of 25, so that's always a plus. Let's give this guy some juice. Oops. Yeah, man. There we go. Now the funny thing with tubes is sometimes when you fill a tube up, it'll immediately sound like it's leaking, because what happens is when the tube shrinks inside the tire, you get air in between the tube and the tire when the tube is empty. And then when you fill the tube up, all that air that's in between the tube and the tire has to escape from somewhere, and it actually comes out around the valve stem on the rim. So just because when you pump a tube up for the first time it makes a hissing sound doesn't mean you put a hole in it when you installed it. Although sometimes it does. In this case, I don't think so. So I gotta see what the pressure rating, 23 PSI cold. So I'm gonna go get my gauge, my new gauge, and check that. Nice Slime brand tire gauge, and no, I'm not sponsored by Slime. I don't use their products enough to be sponsored by them, but on occasion, they work well. About 23 pounds. I'm actually going to put another pound or two in, even though it says 20 PSI max, because these are tubed. Oops. I'm going to run them at about 25. And that's pretty close. The other thing that's nice about this gauge is it holds the pressure on the dial. So when you check your tire pressure, you put it on and it'll hold the reading on the screen. Then you push this little valve and it resets it. So let me put my valve core or my valve cap back on. While I'm at it, I'll check the one on the other side here. And this rear end actually leaks. This is the one I locked a while back in one of my videos this summer. I think I either messed up one of the seals when I put it together, or like the high-low lever leaks or something. But basically, if you have a leak on a seal that's more than halfway up the transmission, once it stops leaking, it's probably still going to have about 3.5 or 4 quarts of oil in it. I don't really see the point in pulling it back out, taking it all apart and changing a seal again. I think I changed the wheel seals on this one when I had it apart, and I changed the gasket on the case itself, and I thought it was leaking out. The gasket I put on it, turns out, actually I think it's the input shaft on this one that was leaking. So it was basically where the pulley, the drive pulley goes in, it was leaking there because I didn't have that seal, and I just left it alone. I'm not really that concerned about it. Like I said, once it leaks out to a certain point, it's not going to leak anymore. So no, it's not really the right thing to do to leave it, but it is what it is. I got better things to do than to keep taking stuff apart 25 times. And that's 20, so I'm going to put a little more in this guy, just so they're the same. And it is important when you're running a posi on a tractor, make sure the tire pressure is equal on both tires, because it will change the outer diameter of the tire and actually make it plow even worse. Plow by meaning the steering is actually not working well, but it'll make it worse. It'll actually act like it has turning brakes if one tire has more air than the other one, because the outer diameter is bigger, the circumference is bigger, it actually makes the tractor turn. So even trying to drive straight with this tractor, because that tire's been flat, the tractor wants to always turn to the right because that tire diameter is smaller. Now they should be the same. So there's another problem fixed. And I'm going to go take it for a ride and hopefully get that slime around there so it stops leaking. Is now that I got that slime all run around the tire, and I put a whole quart in there because you really don't know how much you actually need to find the hole and fill it. The way slime works is it's kind of like a biodegradable, I think it's like some kind of a newspaper and whatever the green slime is that's in it. So it's all ground up fibers, and what it does is when it runs over where the hole is, normally air would blow through the hole. Well, the fibrous stuff that's inside slime gets pushed through that hole and congeals, and it binds itself up and basically makes the hole constipated so it can't poop air. So can't fart anymore. So that one, hopefully I got it all worked around, and hopefully it found the hole and it sealed it up. If it doesn't, well then I'm out $10 and I got to change the tube anyway, but it's worth a try. Save me an hour taking the tire off and unmounting it and remounting it and all that stuff. Rather try this first. So let's see what I can fix next. All right, so somewhere up underneath here, there's about a 2-inch long piece of rubber hose that connects the fuel tank to the injection pump. And it's not easy to get at to change, but it's leaking, so I have to get to it. Now, what I'm probably gonna have to do is take the support rail. So this grill support rail that's here, I'm probably gonna have to take this guy off so I can take off the fuel tank brackets and lift the whole fuel tank up and then replace that piece and bolt it back on. So not really too bad. A couple of bolts to get that support piece off, a couple of bolts to get the tank off. And honestly, I need to grind this down anyway, because when I put it on, I didn't grind it down. I just twisted it and then put it on, and it looks like it's been rubbing on the hood. You can see this line here. That's actually been rubbing right here. So I should probably fix that while I have it apart. We'll see if I do or not. And I need to clean the battery off. It's got all kinds of dirt. I mean, this was my main mowing machine all summer long, and I didn't put a battery hold down on this thing, so I had to jam this rag in here, which worked out good anyway, because half the time, you know, there's some kind of diesel leaking, or I'd spill stuff and it would get all over the place over here. This thing really needs a good cleaning. Realistically, it probably needs valve cover gasket. Even though it's a brand new motor, it is Chinese motor, so probably needs a few things. But for now, I'm gonna fix that fuel line. So tank is off. Ironically, I realized it was leaking right after I filled it up the last time I used this to mow. So it's coming out the return line on the top of the tank, but this tiny little piece of hose is what got messed up. And for those of you who have never seen extremely long needle nose pliers, these things are worth their weight in gold when you're trying to get down to a clip like that that's underneath the injection pump and everything else. I couldn't get to it with my standard diagonal cutter, so these guys, lifesaver. These are just cheapies. I think I either bought these at Napa years ago or at Harbor Freight. They're like $3 or $4 or $5 a pair. They're well worth it. I have a straight pair and a bent pair. So, let's see if I can get this piece of hose off. And these are the, you know, standard garbage spring clamps that usually don't work. And here's the troublesome hose. This little 2-inch piece of hose. And let me see if I can get a picture on what it looks like. So let me get the clamps off of here. Basically, let's see if you can see this. Right here, which is where it was going into the injection pump, there's a split. Kind of see that? Maybe not the best angle, but it's basically split wide open. So when they build these engines, they use what is essentially windshield washer hose. It is not reinforced with fibers like standard fuel line, so it's guaranteed to fail within a year. I mean, I probably have 15 hours on this motor since I put it in this tractor, and this piece already failed. I mean, granted, it was a couple years old when I put it in, but that's just ridiculous. I mean, now it's like, it's completely split open. This stuff just peels. It's garbage. So I guess I've used the word garbage a lot lately on stuff, but this is garbage. So I'm going to go ahead and put some regular real fuel line on here, and we'll get this thing back in service. All right, so you see how this hose, you can see it has those white lines in it. This is a reinforced piece of fuel line. You can also see like there's braiding in the side. This is what should have been used, besides the fact that it says made in USA on it, which is always good. But this is what they should have used for fuel line. I forgot it's metric, so it's probably like 8mm, which 5/16 is close enough to 8mm. So that's what I have here, piece of 5/16 fuel line, and that's literally all it is. It's about 2.25 inches long. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this, hopefully get it all back together here and have no more leaks. that pretty much takes care of that. Made sure I got all the rubber bushings back on my fuel tank because, like the old rock song, this thing will shake, rattle, and roll.